As I sat at my desk, I started thinking about the 30 years that had passed since Maggie and I got married. I thought about our honeymoon and all of the amazing times I'll never forget. It makes me feel sentimental and appreciative to think back on that time spent in Hawaii with Maggie. It really was incredible and a fascinating chapter I'll always treasure. From the start, we felt like we were entering a magical world, escaping the everyday and discovering something special. We took in the sand between our toes as we strolled along wide beach and listened to the waves, which seemed to whisper secrets. There was a feeling of splendor all around us, and the lovely smell of plumeria filled the air, reminding us of the peace and love that surrounded us. But it wasn't just the incredible scenery that made our honeymoon so special. It was the time we spent together. It felt like we were uncovering Mother Nature's riches as we explored lush jungles and found hidden waterfalls. We were all blown away by the strength and beauty of our surroundings. The views from our stunning cliffside resort in Maui seemed to go on forever. Each night, the sky came alive with a kaleidoscope of colors. We shared an abundance of love and devotion, enjoying candlelit dinners on the beach under a canopy of stars, savoring fresh seafood and regional specialties. The evenings were like a beautiful melody, but it was the love in Maggie's eyes that made it truly magical. Hawaii was more than just a place we visited. It became the center of our romantic tale, full of hopes and memorable events. We parted ways, and I'm reminded of the depth and beauty of our relationship when I think back on our honeymoon. It restored our love, strengthened our bond, and brought us moments of unadulterated joy and tranquility, with so much thankfulness in it. My heart is filled with gratitude for the memories of our time together in that magical place. 30 years later, my secretary came in and saw me gazing out the window, lost in thought. "What's bringing you such joy these days?" she asked. "Jason won the lottery," I replied. I realized that for the past 2 weeks, I had been happy and smiling. I told her how, after all these years, my wife I felt appreciated and loved once more. It was the best honeymoon experience I could have asked for. I was eager to see her again. I was behaving like a romantic teenager. I didn't want this joy to last. Maggie and I have a good marriage, but even after 30 years, routine may still seem boring. Maggie had been incredibly loving and pursuing closeness virtually every evening. We were close virtually every evening and talked about parts of our relationship we hadn't discussed in a long time. I had no idea that her feelings for me went beyond simply rekindling our relationship. I left work early to arrange a romantic surprise evening. I got her favorite wine, 24 roses and chocolate-covered cherries. I'm going to surprise her with a 7. I thought a night cruise would be a great way to show my love and honor our everlasting love. I went upstairs to the kitchen after getting in through the garage. Brandy was sitting at the table, not my wife Maggie, our 29-year-old. I said, "Hey, sweetheart, where's your mom?" I gave her a smile and a kiss on the forehead. Brandy had spoken with her mother 2 weeks prior. "I don't know, Mom. I'm scared that if I go through with this, I'll hurt my dad, who I love very much. Whiskey Dad will understand. He loves you. You acknowledge that you require something. Dad isn't getting any younger either. I'm sure he'll understand if you ask him to let you go on this date. I can't tell him I'm going on a date with someone else. Mom, I'm just not ready for that. Let me handle it. You'll be ready to go by 6. Dad gets home at 7, so Alexander will be waiting for you at the restaurant at 7 o'clock. So, at 6 o'clock in the evening, you'll finally get to have the encounter you've been waiting for. I'll explain everything to him. I know I said yes to this date, honey, but I'm not sure something feels off about this. I shouldn't leave for the next 2 weeks. How am I going to be able to look your father in the eye? Am I aware that I consented to go on a date with a different man? I would advise you not to tell him anything, though. During these over the next 2 weeks, let him know how much you care. Tell him not to worry about anything and he'll get it when I explain everything. Love is not the issue. It's just a little fun and some new pals. Make contact with him and rock his world. He'll throw open his arms to have you back when I explain the scenario that night. Your dad is willing to do anything for you because he loves you. He demonstrated his affection for you by constantly giving. You've got everything you wanted, and I think you're right. There's only one date, and I'm not going to leave your father for another man. 30 years later, going out for a good time shouldn't be difficult. I'm going to tell your dad how much I adore him, and how amazing he is. Up until the night of the date, I'll try to make him the happiest guy alive when I return. Just give him a sense of appreciation and affection, Mom. He's a wonderful man who will provide you with an unforgettable encounter. I have to go home now and make Mike some dinner. Regard, sweetie. Also, greet Mike. When will we get grandchildren from you both soon? Before leaving for home, Brandy said we've already talked and plan to start working on it in a few months. Maggie was facing his most recent project alone in the art studio Jason had built for her behind their home. She'd been having trouble being creative lately, thinking about being with another man. Then she remembered Bry's words, and her brushes began to dance across the canvas, bringing vivid hues and poignant scenes to life. She was sure that she was doing well on her own. Maggie sat by herself and felt her guilt melt away. At first, Jason could be upset, but I think I can convince him otherwise. He's an amazing husband and parent, and I genuinely admire him. She's got plans to spoil him, so I'll be the best wife and show him how much I care that evening. Maggie showered, fixed her hair, and put on lipstick before putting on his favorite baby doll nightgown, welcoming Jason back to his house. Maggie, clothed in the nightgown and high heels, led him into the bedroom and shocked him with. She undressed him and gave him a long overdue bit of enthusiasm. She made him feel good about himself, and felt warm and happy as he smiled. She wondered why she hadn't done this earlier. It was the nicest welcome home he'd had in a long time. Jason, what's the occasion? I was happy to pull him onto the bed for several minutes. They kissed intensely. It had been years since they'd enjoyed such a gratifying connection. Maggie decided not to go on her date with Alexander. As a result, their relationship blossomed into something more during the next few weeks. Jason became a happier man, who laughed, smiled, and showed affection. Maggie was as happy as she'd been in a long time. She started to rethink her plans. She even asked Brandy whether she still needed the scheduled experience after talking to her about the great developments. That's great, Mom, but don't cancel just yet. Let's see what happens during the following 2 weeks. Enjoy each other and the moment will tell you. You don't have to cancel right away. You are welcome to cancel at any time, and we will let's wait 2 weeks and see how Alexander reacts. I'm sure he'll understand, but remember this might be our last chance. Okay, you might be right. Tell me more about the problem with Alexander. I know he's the father of your friend. Yes, exactly. I heard he took time off work after his wife Mary was diagnosed with an incurable brain tumor. He stayed by her side until she passed away. She was his whole life. He was lost when she died. He became very sad and stopped doing anything but work. Mary and I suggested he start dating, and he agreed. I had no idea how to be in a relationship. I started crying as I listened to him, and thought maybe I could help the two of you. Brandy went on to tell her mother how much Alexander admired her, and how much he missed having a friend. She told her about Alexander's excitement at finally meeting Maggie and their talk. You see, Mother, he finds you attractive and would like to spend time with you. I'll give him your phone number so you can set up a date. I have no doubt that you will click, even though he is 10 years your junior. All he needs is someone to talk to and get along with. After a lovely chat the next day, Alexander asked Maggie to stay over. She felt like a schoolgirl when he complimented her in the picture and said he'd love to go on a date with her. She was excited about trying something new. She told him she was looking forward to seeing him and said yes to the date. They texted back and forth. As their dates drew nearer, they became more and more flirtatious. It was impossible to measure Maggie's faithfulness based on her text messages. She was excited all the time and made an effort to remember Jason. Each night she gave their romantic endeavors more and more of her attention. Maggie was walking around wanting to have sex more than she was capable of controlling. Jason was grinning. She was having an incredible time on this new level. My daughter was the most beautiful girl in the world and I loved her. I'm really pleased with how she's grown into the lady she is now. I wish I'd given her more time as she grew older, but I did my best to provide them with a happy life and supported her as much as I could. I was ashamed, but I forced a grin when I saw her. "What are you doing here? How is your mother doing?" I asked. I'd brought a box of chocolates, a bottle of wine, and 24 roses. "I can't wait to visit your mom tonight because I have a nice surprise for her. I took out my travel itinerary and tickets for a 7-day cruise. I've got a day trip on the new yacht in my jacket pocket. I'm really looking forward to seeing your mom's reaction when she finds out I'm taking her on a 7. I decided to take her on a day cruise when she got home. My dad said I should surprise her. She used to call me Daddy, and it always made me smile to think of her curled up on my lap as a young child. However, something didn't feel right. She was panting heavily and had tears in her eyes. She was obviously anxious to tell me what she'd done. "Dad, we need to talk." A tear was streaming down her cheek. I was concerned. "What's wrong? Is there a problem with Mum?" I told her to sit down and explained that my mum is doing well. She paused for a moment and said, "You know how much my mum loves you, Dad. She also told me how great things have been between you and my aunties recently. I love my mum too. I want to tell her how much she means to me because of this." I could see she wasn't expecting the news, because of the tears in her eyes. I apologized, but my mum went on a date. I sat there, trying to. I was pretty shocked by what she said, so I got pretty angry. I asked her where her mum was now. I was pretty loud, and I could see she was scared. I told her I loved her mum a lot. I hope she didn't mind me saying that. I also told her that her mum wasn't coming back until tomorrow. She'd gone out with someone else. She didn't want to hurt me, so I offered to tell you what had happened. I'm just here for one night. Her return date is tomorrow. Is this a joke? Is this some kind of mistake? I can't believe this. Your mother would never act in such a way as to betray me. We shared a deep and loving bond. There's no way this is true. She loves you, Dad. All she needed was a little more in life. She needed at least one more thing after 30 years of marriage. Nothing is changing in your relationship. But since she understood she might love you even more, I gazed at my child. Why are you involved in this? Brandy, your mother shouldn't have involved you in this. She's the one I should be speaking to, not you. How did you end up in this situation? I've always been close to my parents, and we share everything with each other. She said that she no longer felt wanted and that things had slowed down between you two in the bedroom. I introduced them because my friend's dad needed company after losing his wife a few years earlier. I jumped up from my chair, knocking it over in the process. How on earth are you going to tell the truth? You set up a date for your mother with someone else. Are you saying that she stayed silent, lowering her head and looking at the floor? I walked back and forth in the kitchen, trying to make sense of what was going on. Oh no, Brandy, respond to me. I stood over her, towering over her. I yelled, "Have you set this up? Is this the father of your friend dating your wife?" I lost control of my saliva at your husband's fit of rage. "I'm sorry, Daddy. I did it because I adore my friend's parents." Goodness, how did you proceed? I'm still in love with you. Am I just a piece of garbage that you can ignore and expect me to accept whatever you think of right now? Where is she? Why did you claim that she wouldn't return until? The next day, they went to see this strange man, who I don't know. After that, they spent the night together. She's coming back tomorrow, and she loves you, Daddy. For the past 2 weeks, she's been telling me how much she loves you and hopes nothing bad happens to you. There's only one date and one evening. She assumed you'd be understanding and give her one chance. Is that all there is to it? I thought the affection she's been showing me for the past 2 weeks that she really cares, but you're now saying it was just her way of getting rid of the guilt. I can tell you that this won't end well. She cried even harder and begged. It's not at all like that, Dad. She never acted fake or hurt you. She tried her hardest to show her love for you. Could you please give her one night, Dad? She can't picture her life without you. You know that she loves you. She's told you. She was really excited about your retirement, and the chance to spend time with your grandkids. When Mike and I have kids, we'll need you both. Isn't that ironic? She agreed to go on a date with someone other than me, so it's over. Who is this guy? He's the dad of my friend Mary. He's also very kind. You'll like him. I think you're similar. We could be the best of friends. You think I'll make friends with a man who dates a married woman? Maybe we could be drinking buddies and on the weekends I could let him use your mother. That's your strategy for me. Realizing there had been a serious error in her strategy, Brandy sank back into her chair. She was never one to listen. Shivered down her spine and gave her a deep, profound shock, causing her to cower after pacing the room. I regained my composure and turned to face my daughter. My voice was venomous. She felt small and responsible for her part in the incident because I could clearly see how wounded and angry I was. Brandy, pay close attention. Go and really understand what you two did to me tonight. I need some alone time. You don't have to see or talk to me. No texts, no calls at all. You can't get away with betraying me. I'm not your father anymore. You are no longer my daughter either. Leave me. Brandy, I'm leaving now. Don't ever talk to me again. I want to stay here tonight, Dad, but just don't say I love you. Mom and I are planning to come live with you. You shouldn't be left alone. This kind of gratitude makes me feel like I'm nothing more than a meal ticket and will never gain your respect. She pleaded between sobs. I love you, Dad. Think about it tomorrow. Let Mom explain everything. You love her, and you've enjoyed 30 amazing years together. If you give her this one thing, she won't go anywhere. She adores you. I will never be hers again, but she can have anything she wants. I can't even begin to forgive her. Will there be consequences for everyone involved? Even the man who abducted my wife? You've now revealed your true self. Your mother is still with you. Nothing about Brandy has changed for you. You're not my daughter anymore. She was crying as she left. She was in pain. She realized that helping her mom with this plan might have gone too far. She knew her father would have reacted badly. She'd been taken aback by how harsh he was. If he genuinely disowned her for the first time, she'd pleaded for his forgiveness even though she knew he loved them both. His rage was evident. I'd called Maggie's mobile just after Brandy left, but it went straight to voicemail when my calls went unanswered. I'd left her many messages begging her to come home. I'd even had a few beers, but still no answer. I'd realized around 2 in the morning she wasn't answering my calls, so I felt sorry for myself as I turned to the TV and looked blankly at more depressing news. My world quickly turned into a nightmare as I thought back on our 30 years of marriage, the highs and lows, and how routine had replaced our once frequent intimacy, even though our sexual life had become routine. I felt a twinge of loss. No grievances were voiced. We would always embrace and fall asleep in one another's arms. After cuss, we hardly argued or said I love you anymore. Looking out of the studio I'd built for Maggie, I realized it was more than just a place for her to unleash her talents. It was significant, despite being pleased with her achievements. I felt marginalized, though I cared about her happiness. The conversation with Brandy was really eye-opening. I was really surprised to find out that she wanted to be with someone else. I had no idea. I had spent years working hard to provide for my family, so I didn't realize she wasn't happy in our marriage. It hurt and made me angry that she chose to discuss this with Brandy rather than me. My life, my house, and my future. I thought back to the house and land I had inherited from my grandfather in my own name before we got married. I had to think without a mortgage. Drunk and enraged, I devised plans to harm Maggie the way she had injured me. I felt a wave of strength come over me as I stared out of her studio. I got up and started working again, trying to ignore the sadness and alcohol. I went back and forth to our bedroom a lot, collecting whatever she had and moving it into the studio. Then I remembered things in the attic and got photo albums out, including our wedding photos, and stacked them up. I added them to the pile at the top, her baby clothes, her wedding dress, and more. The mound kept growing and growing. I was amazed at how much she'd accumulated over the years. I took her photos down from the walls and put them in the stack. Then I added her drawings and sculptures. All of her treasured belongings are now part of the never-ending pile. It was 5 a.m. already and I were feeling pretty uncomfortable. I decided to wait until 6 o'clock in the morning, giving her time to answer or reply to my calls and messages. If I didn't hear back from her or she wasn't home at 5:30, I'd go ahead with my plan. I made sure she had everything she needed in the studio by doing a second check of the house. I went to the garage to get a 20L gasoline can and then I made my way to the studio to be ready for 6 a.m. While I was waiting, I took the cash from the safe, canceled our joint credit cards, moved the funds to our accounts, packed a couple of suitcases and loaded them into my truck. I'm going to avoid the situation until the lawyer has resolved it. I let her back in at 6005 for an additional 5 minutes, but my last hope is beginning to fade. I doused the pile and the walls of the studio with gasoline. I sighed deeply and hesitated for a moment before lighting a match and setting her stuff on fire. Before I could get out, the fire had spread quickly and was visible from the street. Her world burned quickly as I was traveling. As I drove down the highway, I had a sudden realization, made all the more striking by how upset I was. Tears streamed down my face as I realized that my once happy marriage had perished in a fire, much like the studio. The house was now in jeopardy as the fire moved to the back porch. Thankfully, the fire was put out. Before the house was completely destroyed, it needed repairs due to severe smoke damage. It was 90 miles from the burned ruins of my marriage. In the meantime, I'd booked into a motel and paid cash to stay under the radar. I was overwhelmed and worn out after switching. I switched off my phone, went to bed and dozed off until midday. When I woke up, I saw that I had missed calls and texts from Maggie, Brandy and the sheriff. I met Alexander at the restaurant after getting out of the Uber. I was nervous and excited at the same time when I saw him. The young man who was waiting for me at the front desk smiled and complimented my little black dress, black sheer tights and matching high heels. His eyes focused on my bare cleavage, which was made more prominent by my black bra. I had gone to the salon for several hours earlier in the day to make sure my makeup and hair looked flawless. I wanted this one moment to be memorable and perfect for him. My friend seemed happy with what he saw, and his reaction was further shown by the way he adjusted his manhood. I gave him a gentle kiss, feeling more confident now that I knew he seemed to appreciate what he saw, so we sat on bar stools at the bar. When I stood up, I saw his eyes focusing on my nylon-clad legs all the way down to my underwear. He ordered our drinks, and we grinned at each other, deciding to turn off my phone to prevent any disruptions since this was a one-time event. I decided to enjoy every second of it. We talked like old friends since there was an obvious chemistry between us. I caught myself stroking his arm and engaging in flirtatious behavior that I rarely engaged with anyone, not even Jason. I was going to embrace the moment and find my inner confidence. The hostess showed us to our seats. Once we'd finished our second glass, we were told our table was ready. The meal was delicious, and I enjoyed our time together and our chat. He asked if I still wanted to stay the night, so I kicked off my heels and put my foot in front of him for a playful prod. When he saw my red toenails showing through the flimsy nylon I had on my foot, his smile grew. He said it was time to go and led me to his reserved hotel room, holding my hand as the elevator doors opened on the 14th floor. I suddenly realized what I was actually going to do, and images of Jason flashed through my mind. Alexander sensed my uncertainty and drew me up against his strong frame. He looked up at me and kissed me passionately, in a way I'd never experienced before. I'd never encountered anything like it. All thoughts of my husband and marriage vanished in that instant. I was ready to embrace and savor this experience because tonight I was his. He didn't take long to unzip my dress after entering the room. He undressed and stood in front of me as soon as it hit the ground. He turned me around, complimented my looks, took off my bra and laid me down on the bed. I was really looking forward to what was going to happen next because the experience was so sensual and wonderful. I knelt and spent 5 minutes UGL his body. He was so impressed that he quickly took off my pantyhose and demanded that I put my heels back on. He found them attractive, which made me feel a little daring throughout our closeness. He was really good at kissing. I felt like I should ask Jason to take over. It was quite alluring. Oh no, comparing once more. His eyes met mine and he said, "Maggie, you have my undying love." His surprising statement struck a deep chord with me, bringing tears of delight to my eyes and stirring an almost religious sensation. That night, we made love multiple times, then again in the morning. The next morning, every meeting was just as intense as the last. It was the best thing I'd ever experienced sexually, and I was happy that I'd allowed it with Alexander. Jason's ideas started to bother her. I tried to focus on the man, putting his arms around me, sunlight streaming in through the drapes, bathing us. He stroked my hair and gave me a gentle kiss. "Maggie, I really meant it when I said it last night. You're amazing, so sultry and seductive. I believe I love you too. I'd like to hang out with you more. When can we next see one another?" Fear took hold of me and I answered softly, "Alexander, that was incredible. You're a fantastic guy too, but I can't do this anymore because I'm happily married. I treasured it because it was a one-time experience. Time and experience have shown you to be outstanding. You were an amazing partner, and I enjoyed every second of it. Maggie, think about it before you brush me off. I can make you happy and your spouse doesn't seem to mind at all. Just give it some thought before making a decision." "All right, I will consider it, but that's all I have to offer for now." He gave me another passionate kiss. And I gave into his hug right away. I would be with Alexander if I weren't married to Jason, but I am, so I thought he'd understand my recent actions. We left the hotel after breakfast, and I decided to turn on my phone, which I hadn't used since our date the night before. Alexander drove me home, and I was surprised till I checked my phone and saw how many missed calls and texts there were. Jason's message stood out to me the most because it made me feel extremely guilty, and cried because I realized how much I had contributed to his pain. We were barely inside my neighborhood when my phone rang, interrupting me before I could read the next message. It was my kid calling out for me to come somewhere. I reassured them, explaining that I'd just heard about a fire at our house and was almost home. It seemed like the news had been trying to reach me all night, but I hadn't had my phone on me. My child told me that their father was absent, so I immediately started to worry about him. I didn't know where he was and he wasn't answering calls. "I promised I'll give you a call back as soon as I get there. I'm feeling pretty depressed and really disturbed by what's going on." I saw a police car and a fire truck in front of our house. When Alexander turned the corner into my neighborhood, I asked the firefighters what had happened because I couldn't see any damage to the front of the house. "Are you the homeowner?" he asked me. I was with a new guy, who was my date, and all the neighbors were there. "I'm Maggie Spencer." "Yes, Mrs. Spencer, we managed to save the house. The back porch was the only thing damaged, but until you get professionals in to remove the smoke from your home, I'm afraid you won't be able to stay there. The tiny cottage behind your house was also affected. I think the worst is that Alexander's lost his identity." He grabbed me and helped me sit on the curb as I felt my legs give out. "My workspace, is she hurt?" "I'm sorry, Mrs. Spencer, but she's nothing but ashes now. We'll try to find out where the fire started, but the police detective has some questions for you to answer in the meantime. Sergeant Wilson could ask me some more questions." I got up and went to the back of the house. I was standing in front of the remains of my most valuable possession when he caught up with me. I realized right away that Jason had to have done this in retaliation for what I had done. "Mrs. Spencer, could you tell me what happened here?" Sergeant Wilson asked. "Wilson, I wasn't there the night before and I don't know anything. Are you the spouse of this woman?" He turned to Alexander and asked. "Are you just a companion?" The sergeant asked me where my spouse was. He gave me a knowing look that made me feel embarrassed. I said I wasn't sure. I replied that I was with Alexander at the Hilton Hotel in the city center. When he asked where I had been the previous evening, I realized how bad my situation was when the sergeant and his aide looked at me like I was crazy. My spouse had vanished too, and I just said that I didn't stay the night with him. Now the detective was asking if I and my spouse were no longer together. Spencer, where did he go yesterday night? As a married couple, we're happy, and when I told him I'd spent the night with another man, I realized how ridiculous that sounded. Do you know where he is? Please don't tell him I called. He doesn't pick up the phone. We'll speak to him. He gave me his business card and said, please give him my number when you spoke to him. I was shaking with fear and anger. I was terrified at losing everything I'd worked for over the years. I was scared of what would happen to my marriage if Jason became so angry as to do this. I had to get in touch with him right away. I called Brandy. Brandy, are you aware of I didn't find out where my dad was until last night. I thought we'd arranged for me to stay with him here. He said I was no longer his daughter and threw me out. I had a sudden cold after hearing these words. Jason would never say something like that. It would be worse than I thought if he did. I went into the house and I noticed a bad smell coming from the walls, as well as smoke damage. It was clear that these living conditions were unsustainable. I decided to grab some clothes and a few personal belongings for a few days while I moved among our residents. When I went into the bedroom, I was shocked to see everything gone. I felt panicked when I looked on my nightstand for my wedding rings and saw that they were missing, along with all of my clothes, shoes, and personal items. I had left my rings behind. What was going through my mind? Jason might have thought I had given up on our marriage if he had seen them on my dresser. I was being naive and self-absorbed. I rushed through the house, looking for anything I might have left behind. I was shocked to find that everything I owned was gone. I had the worst thought. Had he really left nothing behind and destroyed everything? I left the house and went back to the studio to take a closer look at the remains. I saw half-ruined clothes and photo frames among the wreckage. It was clear that Jason had not only come to terms with my being gone, but had destroyed everything that meant anything to me. I ended things with Alexander in one go, and I was so upset I couldn't even speak. I told Brandy what had happened and that I needed a place to stay. Alexander was the last person I wanted to see, but he quickly offered me a place to stay. I told him I needed time alone and asked him to go, and he left me to regret what I had done and the man I had spent the night with. I knew I was to blame, but I couldn't resist holding him accountable for my actions. I was the one who was at fault, not him. I lost your father, Brandy. Don't say that. Mom, Dad, he adores you, sweetie. He set everything on fire, everything from my workspace to my wardrobe. He abandoned me with nothing, not even a residence. He won't answer my calls or return them. I don't blame him, I've hurt him the most. What I did is not excused. It was not the right date. I should have just spoken with him. We could have made things work, but I pushed him away. If I'd been in his position, there'd be no turning back. What should I do? My clothes and my home are gone. Don't blame yourself, Mom. I take some of the guilt. You're welcome to stay with us while your house is being fixed. This afternoon, we'll get you new clothes. By the evening, we'll get you settled in. My entire collection of paintings and sculptures is lost. I've lost my artistic endeavors, which span 2 decades and 30 years of marriage. I feel completely abandoned. I don't have anything left to live for. Passers-by looked at her from the street. Maggie sobbed freely. Your father is calling. I'll give you a call back. She almost passed out while she was trying to answer the phone, but she couldn't get the buttons to work. She finally got through, but it was too late. Hello, Maggie. What's up with you? Where are you? Jason, please come home. We need to talk. Jason, I want you to know that I value you. I think you should be aware that the studio is gone. Jason, have you completed this task? Maggie, you succeeded, not me. It may not have burned physically, but you're lying and being unfaithful. I lost respect for you when I saw you throw away your wedding rings and give yourself to someone else. Your behavior is not excused. Furthermore, Bry's involvement is incomprehensible and degrading. We're done now. On Monday, I'll meet with attorneys to start the process. Could we please just chat and figure this out? Jason, You can't throw away our 30 amazing years in this manner. Maggie and I are in communication. Furthermore, it was not me who threw away our 30 amazing years. You had treachery planned to ease your guilt. You showered me with affection for 2. I don't understand why you're involved in this. It's a shame, but I think we should call it a day. I'm going to meet with lawyers on Monday to start the process. Could we please just have a chat and figure this out? Jason, you can't just throw away our 30 amazing years like this. Maggie and I are talking, and it wasn't me who threw away our 30 amazing years. You planned to betray me to ease your guilt. You showered me with affection for 2 weeks, but then you did this. It's been weeks, but then with your daughter's help you betrayed me. Nobody on this planet is capable of accepting or forgiving such betrayal and deceit. I hope you live a wretched existence for the rest of your days regretting this act of pure cruelty. That's all I have to say on the matter. My attorney's contact information will be included with the divorce decree so you can get in touch with me there. I'll see you then. Maggie, Jason, I'm sorry to say that the world I loved was gone, and so was Jason. I was on the phone to Jason, who had already hung up, when Brandy arrived. We hugged and sobbed together over our loss. At last, we knew we couldn't stay in the ruins of my house while the police and fire departments conducted their investigations. We then made our way to Bry's home. She surprised Mike. When she arrived, she gave him a full briefing, while Brandy tried to explain everything. Mike was furious and horrified when he found out that his wife had set up a date for her friend's father with her own mother. You arranged for your mother to go on a date with another man. You should have realized he would never agree to that. I can't believe you agreed to this. What kind of man allows his wife to go out on a date with another person? Do you intend to carry out this task when we are older? Will you betray me knowingly, like Mom did with Dad? He was truly a wonderful man. You and your mother were his entire universe. Brandy, what have you done? I'll tell you what. You destroyed a decent man and made him do things he never would have done otherwise. I'm really disappointed in you. I'll get in touch with him and tell him how stupid you were. I need to talk to you about our future together after this is all done. I'm going to put off having children with you until I find out where you stand. I'll be straight with you. I disagree with your morals and I'm not going to tolerate this kind of deceit. She was astonished by his wrath. She was surprised by his lack of empathy for her mother's situation after 30 years of marriage. There was only one date, for goodness sake. What now? Eventually, she realized that her father's passing, her mother's broken heart, and the breakdown of her parents' marriage were the real issues they would have to face. The fallout from her actions was going to have consequences. I went back home to evaluate the situation. By the time I got back 5 days later, I'd had a chance to think things over. I decided not to make an insurance claim to save money. I wasn't going to back down when I said in my legal meeting that the house belonged to me. Maggie was free to keep half of our savings and not pay child support if she refused. I would file a lawsuit for adultery, revealing her liaison with the father of her friend's daughter, and the divorce. The process was already well underway. I also asked around for guidance on filing criminal charges for arson. I was told that unless I filed a fake report, it probably wouldn't go through without an insurance claim. When Bry's neighbor, with whom she attended school, saw me coming home and going inside, she called her. Brandy ran to join me. I was assessing the damage and determining what needed to be done. I was focused on assessing the damage when I heard the front door open. "Where the hell are you, Dad?" Maggie's voice echoed through the house. I didn't say anything, just looked at the destruction. The house that had been Maggie's haven was now an ash heap. I couldn't help but grin. Brandy came running over and gave me a hug. "I'm sorry, Daddy," she said. "Please, we love you. I'm not able to forgive you both. Brandy, I've already given you the runaround. I beg you to release me and leave me alone. You claim to be my daughter, so you have my forgiveness. You are no longer my daughter. Listen, you're just a dishonest individual who crushed my heart. Now go away and leave me alone. Papa, Mum requires you. She moved in with us and is really missing you. She wants to apologize to you for her error and weeps all the time. Could you please visit our home to see her? The marriage ended when she went on that date and stayed with someone else. Even her wedding rings were abandoned, which put a final stop to our union. It's finished. I'll never talk to her again. I can be contacted by either of you via my attorney today. I'll receive a new phone number. You ought to go be with your unfaithful mother for the time being. Will you truly forfeit 30 years of blissful childhood memories with your mother? No, not me. Your mother squandered those 30 years away. She went to her lover. As soon as she took her rings off, my 30 years of bliss was wrecked by you and your mother. I'll never forget or forgive you for it. This is your second chance to leave my house, tearfully. Brandy fled her childhood home. It's devastated her that her father said she was no longer his daughter. The hurt caused by his statements persisted even after years of therapy. When Maggie received her divorce papers the next day, she crumpled in realization that her affair had ended their marriage. She went to counseling, tried to talk to Jason and use reason, but it didn't work. He cut off contact with both Brandy and Maggie. When Mike finally got through to Jason, he was upset and disappointed with their behavior because of Bry's betrayal. He's now having couples counseling to try and keep their marriage intact. After Jason renovated it, Maggie intended to go back home, but the divorce decree said it was his for 10 years. She was given half of their savings and $3,000. Despite Jason refusing to pay, she still has to provide child support to the tune of $0.000 a month. After 30 years of relying on him, she's now got to find work. She's moved from her daughter's place to a small apartment close to the city center, and is trying to make ends meet by working at an art gallery. She was in a tricky situation. She couldn't just sit in front of her paintings and look out the large windows her husband got her while admiring the view of the lake. She also couldn't spend all of her time in Jason's exquisite studio. She didn't have any time to herself after work. All of her time was taken up. She lost her affluence. And her blissful marriage, along with all her leisure time, was ruined by one wild evening with a different man. She'll always regret that one mistake, no matter how many tears she sheds. Jason, her devoted spouse, won't ever talk to her again. To keep her marriage together, the daughter was sad over her parents' divorce. She was falling apart and went to see a therapist. The house was fixed after several months. Jason sold after making the payments that the court had mandated. The house was abruptly sold. Maggie arrived to make amends. After the sale, a young couple was waiting at the door. "Hi, can we help you?" the woman asked. "I'm trying to find Jason Spencer." "Is he here?" "No, he left to start a new life after selling us this house. He was very considerate." "Maggie, are you there?" "I guess he left me an envelope. I'll read it later. I wish you well in your new residence, Maggie." She was sobbing as she realized she would never see Jason again. Her hands were shaking as she opened the letter, regretting the love she had so carelessly lost back in her lonely apartment. Maggie was 30 years old. "I think I could have done better with that time. It was so similar to counting the grass blades on our lawn or observing paint dry. It's funny how I used to feel that I couldn't be the husband you needed, given your actions. It was obvious that you needed a circus rather than a spouse. Well done on making it work outside of our union. You should have realized that the 2 weeks you spent acting like a devoted wife were only a prelude to the big event, an introduction to your great treachery. I was fooled completely, duped by your Academy Award-winning performance. While you were off enjoying yourself with someone else, I was organizing a wonderful night to celebrate us. Maggie, you didn't simply shatter us, you gave us an orbital nuke. I've done you a favor by vanishing. Yes, it is correct. I've moved on to more fertile pastures. I'm leaving the circus to the clowns. Please stop trying to find me. I'm hidden behind layers of unfamiliar faces, apart from our daughters and yours. I'm taking a fresh start. This time away from any drama regarding our house is just another chapter in your conflict, driven by self-interest. Maybe the new owners will be able to remove the stench of betrayal from it. Do you want resolution? Think about it. Write it down. Complete the task. Put it behind the closet where you keep all of your other poorly thought out choices. Maggie, here's to your fresh starts. I hope they fade as quickly as your devotion. Goodbye, Jace, from the man who used to adore you. She believed that her tears had run out, but she hugged her knees closely and cried nonstop. After reading his note, she spent the rest of the night feeling regretful and sorrowful. She was filled with a sense of loss, having spent the previous days with Alexander at 52. She knew that her days without Jason felt bleak. In a moment of brief, wild pleasure, she traded her opulent lifestyle for a chance at something different. As Alexander was about to leave for his new home in Ecuador, Jason approached him suddenly, as soon as the door opened. Jason said he was married to the woman Alexander had stolen from him. Alexander tried to defend himself, saying he didn't think Maggie would mind and that he wouldn't have pursued her otherwise. But Jason wouldn't listen. The man in front of him was the target of all the rage, indignation, and pain he'd been carrying for months. The exchange was short-lived because Jason had to use a cane. Alexander's life was turned upside down in the blink of an eye, and Jason left to catch his flight out of the country. Alexander was given a heads-up about the pitfalls of dating a married woman. Jason had already moved into his Burnaby beachside apartment when Alexander arrived at the emergency department to report the attack. He had to leave his family and his past behind and start over. Detectives it took 2 weeks to find out that Jason had left the country. Even if they could track him down, they wouldn't be able to proceed until he returned, due to accusations of assault. Ecuador doesn't extradite, so Alexander had to get back on his feet with new knees. He had to endure a grueling 2 weeks in the hospital and months of physical therapy. The 25 stitches on his face would never be forgotten, and neither would the married woman who didn't know what it was time for a change. The 2 women who had convinced him to take another man's wife knew he was moving on from his former life. He never got in touch with Maggie or Brand again. Mike Bry's spouse almost abandoned her as a result of the events after receiving guidance from a psychotherapist. Brandy realized her mistakes and made a commitment to remain faithful to Mike and their future family. Mike decided to have children after delaying for 2 years. For 2 years he kept his word and thought about how guilty she was. He needed to be sure she wouldn't betray him like she had her own father. Jason ended his relationship with Brandy. She had ruined her father's feelings with her actions. Maggie and Brandy were upset to hear about Alexander's attack. They felt even worse when they realized how much they had played a part in the violence and the breakdown of Jason's family. This showed them yet again that their decisions had consequences they hadn't foreseen. They realized how naive it had been to think that letting Maggie make that one mistake would keep everything good in their relationship. Their mistake showed how far happiness is from reality. They suffered eternal sadness, and will always be burdened by the loss of their father and spouse. She never found another companion and lived a lonely life. She was regretful because she was too overcome with melancholy and age. She had hoped to grow old alongside Jason and spend quality time with their grandchildren, but Jason stopped paying child support once he left the country. She had to work because her financial situation was precarious, and she needed money badly. After selling my house and saving for the past 30 years, I now have almost $750. I'm hoping to spend the next 30 years living well and peacefully in Ecuador after using this wealth to purchase my new home. I enjoy the company of the young, gorgeous women in the area who are appreciative of a giving American. I came to the realization that divorce is a part of life 6 months after that night, while enjoying a cold beer on the beach across from my new house in Port Lopez. I realized that it's okay to split up. But it's not okay to be alone in a place where you're not valued or appreciated. I promise not to put myself in that situation ever again.